Sarah sat on the worn wooden steps of their small apartment, her frail hands trembling as she watched her son, Tommy, play in the fading light. At 10 years old, Tommy was full of life, chasing after a stray cat with a grin that lit up his face. But Sarah's heart ached. She knew her time was running out. Cancer had ravaged her body, and though she had fought bravely, the end was near. Tommy didn't fully understand, but he sensed the weight of it. He had grown quieter in recent weeks, his laughter less frequent. Still, Sarah clung to these moments, knowing they would be among the last. "Tommy, come here, sweetheart," she called, her voice soft but steady. Tommy bounded over, his cheeks flushed from play. "Yes, Mama?" She pulled him into a hug, holding him close. His small frame felt warm against her, and for a moment, she could almost forget the pain. "I love you so much, my brave boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, remember that you'll always be loved." Tommy nodded, his big brown eyes searching her face. He didn't understand why she said things like that so often now, but he felt the seriousness in her tone. "I love you too, Mama," he replied, hugging her tighter. Sarah had spent weeks worrying about what would happen to Tommy after she was gone. She had no family left, her parents had passed years ago, and Tommy's father, well, that was a secret she had kept for a decade. She had always told Tommy that his father was a good man, but that circumstances had kept them apart. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. She had made arrangements for Tommy to stay with a distant cousin, but doubt gnawed at her. Would they care for him the way he deserved? Would they understand his quiet strength, his love for animals, his need for wide-open spaces? As her condition worsened, Sarah's thoughts turned to the ranch where she had worked years ago. It was a place of happy memories, rolling fields, the scent of hay, the sound of horses neighing in the distance. And then there was Mr. Jenkins, the ranch owner. He had always been kind, though gruff on the outside. More than that, he was Tommy's father, though neither of them knew it. Sarah had fallen in love with Mr. Jenkins during her time at the ranch, but when she discovered she was pregnant, she left without telling him. He had been grieving his late wife at the time, and Sarah hadn't wanted to burden him with the news. She thought she was doing the right thing by raising Tommy on her own. But now, faced with her mortality, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Tommy deserved to know his father, and Mr. Jenkins deserved to know his son. One night, when the pain kept her awake, Sarah sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. Her hands shook as she poured her heart onto the page, explaining everything. She tucked the letter into her diary, planning to give it to Tommy when the time was right. But time slipped away faster than she expected. 2 days later, Sarah passed away in her sleep, leaving Tommy with nothing but her diary and the unopened letter inside. Tommy stood by the graveside, his small hands clutching his mother's diary. The funeral had been simple, just a few neighbors and friends who had known Sarah. Now, as the last of them drifted away, Tommy was left alone with the weight of his grief. At 10 years old, he felt too young to be so utterly alone. His grandparents were gone, and he had no aunts or uncles to turn to. His mother had been his whole world, and now she was gone. The landlord had already told him he'd need to vacate their small apartment by the end of the week. Tommy had nowhere to go. He stared at the fresh mound of earth, his heart heavy. "Be brave," his mother had always said. But how could he be brave when everything felt so hopeless? Then, a memory surfaced, warm summer days at the ranch, the place where his mother had worked before he was born. They had visited a few times over the years, and Tommy had always loved it. The wide-open spaces, the animals, the sense of freedom. And Mr. Jenkins, the ranch owner, had always been kind to him, letting him ride the horses and explore the fields. Maybe, just maybe, Mr. Jenkins would let him stay for a day or two until he figured out what to do next. With that flicker of hope, Tommy picked up his small backpack, stuffed with a few clothes and his mother's diary, and began the long walk to the ranch. It was several miles away, but he didn't mind. The walk gave him time to think, to remember, and to grieve. The Montana sky stretched endlessly above him, painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun dipped lower. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Tommy's sneakers crunched against the gravel road, each step a small act of determination. He didn't know what he'd say when he got there, but he knew he had to try. By the time Tommy reached the ranch, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. The main house was lit from within, and Tommy could see Mr. Jenkins sitting on the porch, smoking his pipe. The old man looked up in surprise as Tommy approached. "Tommy," Mr. Jenkins called, his voice gruff but not unkind. "What are you doing here so late, son?" Tommy's throat tightened, and he fought back tears. "My mama died yesterday," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have anywhere to go. Can I spend the day with you? Just for today?" Mr. Jenkins' expression softened. He had known Sarah was ill, he'd heard through the grapevine in town, but he hadn't realized how serious it was. A pang of guilt hit him. He should have visited more often, should have checked in on her and the boy. And now, here was Tommy, alone and scared, standing on his porch with a backpack slung over his shoulder. "Of course, son," Mr. Jenkins said, standing up and placing a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You can stay the night. We'll figure something out tomorrow." Tommy nodded, relief washing over him. He followed Mr. Jenkins inside, where the rancher gave him a bowl of stew and a warm bed in the guest room. The house smelled of wood smoke and leather, and the walls were lined with photos and old ranching tools. It felt safe, familiar, even though Tommy hadn't been there in years. As he lay in bed, the quilt pulled up to his chin, Tommy felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude for the shelter, but also a deep, aching sadness for his mother. He clutched her diary against his chest, the only piece of her he had left. That night, he dreamed of her smile, her laughter, and the way she used to tuck him in at night. In his dream, she told him to be brave, and he woke up with tears on his cheeks. The next morning, Tommy woke to the sound of roosters crowing. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the ranch. He rubbed his eyes and padded into the kitchen, where Mr. Jenkins was already up, frying eggs and bacon on the stove. "Good morning, Tommy," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice warm despite the early hour. "How did you sleep?" "Okay, thank you," Tommy replied, still feeling a bit shy. He wasn't used to being around Mr. Jenkins, but something about the ranch felt familiar, like a second home. They sat down to eat, the clatter of forks against plates filling the quiet. After breakfast, Mr. Jenkins suggested they go check on the animals. Tommy's eyes lit up. He had always loved the animals on the ranch. They spent the morning feeding the chickens, their feathers glinting in the sunlight as they pecked at the grain. Then they moved to the barn, where Mr. Jenkins showed Tommy how to milk the cows. The rhythmic sound of milk hitting the pail was soothing, and Tommy found himself relaxing, even just a little. Next came the horses. Tommy helped brush their coats, his small hands gentle against their powerful frames. Mr. Jenkins watched him work, impressed by the boy's natural way with the animals. As they tended to the chores, they began to talk. "I remember when your mama used to work here," Mr. Jenkins said, his tone nostalgic as he leaned against a fence post. "She was a hard worker, always smiling. The animals loved her." Tommy smiled sadly, running his hand along a horse's flank. "She talked about the ranch a lot. She said it was her favorite place." Mr. Jenkins nodded, puffing on his pipe. "She was special. I was sad when she left so suddenly." Tommy looked up, curious despite the ache in his chest. "Why did she leave?" Mr. Jenkins hesitated, his brow furrowing as he searched for an answer. "I'm not sure, son. One day she just said she had to go. I never understood why." They continued working in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of the chores giving Tommy something to focus on. Later, they took a break and sat on the porch, sipping lemonade. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves on the trees turning shades of red and gold. Tommy shared stories about his mother, how she used to read to him every night, her voice soft and soothing, how she made the best apple pie, with a crust so flaky it melted in your mouth, how she always encouraged him to be brave, even when she was the one who needed courage. Mr. Jenkins listened intently, feeling a growing affection for the boy. There was something familiar about Tommy, something he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way he tilted his head when he listened, or the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. It reminded him of someone, but he couldn't figure out who. As the day wore on, they went fishing in the creek that ran through the ranch. Mr. Jenkins taught Tommy how to cast a line, his rough hands guiding the boy's smaller ones. They laughed when Tommy caught a small trout, his face beaming with pride as he held it up for Mr. Jenkins to see. In the afternoon, they worked in the garden, picking vegetables for dinner. Tommy was eager to learn, and Mr. Jenkins was patient, showing him how to tell when the tomatoes were ripe and how to pull carrots without breaking them. The earth smelled rich and alive, and for a few hours, Tommy felt lighter, like the weight of his grief wasn't quite so heavy. By the time the sun began to set, they were both tired but content. They sat down for dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and the vegetables they'd harvested, and Tommy ate with gusto, savoring the home-cooked meal. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room. It was then that Tommy pulled out his mother's diary from his backpack. "Mama gave me this before she died," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "She said I should read it when I'm ready." Mr. Jenkins looked at the diary, its leather cover worn and soft from years of handling. "Have you read it yet?" he asked gently. Tommy shook his head. "Not yet. I'm a bit scared." Mr. Jenkins understood. He'd lost people too, his wife, his parents, and he knew how hard it was to face the past. "Whenever you're ready, son. There's no rush." But Tommy felt a sudden urge to know what was inside, as if his mother was whispering to him from beyond. "Maybe I can read it now," he said, his voice small but resolute. "Will you stay with me?" "Of course," Mr. Jenkins replied, scooting his chair closer. Tommy opened the diary, his hands shaking slightly. The pages were filled with his mother's neat handwriting, the ink faded in places but still legible. He took a deep breath and began to read aloud, his voice steadying as he went. The early entries were about Sarah's life on the ranch, how much she loved the work, the animals, and the sense of peace she found there. She wrote about the sunrises over the mountains, the way the horses greeted her each morning, and the quiet evenings spent mending clothes by the fire. Then there were entries about Mr. Jenkins. She wrote about how kind he was, how he made her laugh with his dry humor, and how she had fallen in love with him despite knowing he was still grieving his wife. Tommy's voice faltered as he read the next part. "I think I'm in love with him, but he's still grieving Ellen. I don't know if he'll ever feel the same way. It's hard to see him hurting and not be able to fix it." Mr. Jenkins felt a lump form in his throat. He had cared for Sarah deeply, more than he'd ever admitted to himself. She'd been a bright spot in those dark years after Ellen's death, but he had been too wrapped up in his own pain to notice her feelings. If only he had known. Then came the entry that changed everything. "I'm pregnant," Sarah had written, the words stark against the page. "I don't know what to do. I can't tell him. He's not ready for this. It wouldn't be fair to him or the baby. I think I have to leave." Tommy stopped reading, his eyes wide. "Does this mean?" he whispered, looking up at Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins took the diary from Tommy's hands, his heart pounding as he read the words for himself. His hands trembled as he turned the page. There was a letter tucked inside, addressed to Tommy in Sarah's familiar script. With trembling hands, Tommy opened it and read aloud. "Dear Tommy, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I'm so sorry, my darling. I wish I could have stayed longer. There's something I need to tell you. Your father is Mr. Jenkins, the man who owns the ranch. I loved him deeply, but I left because I didn't want to burden him. He was still grieving his wife, and I thought it was best to raise you on my own. But now, I realize that was a mistake. You deserve to know your father, and he deserves to know you. Please go to him. Show him this letter. I hope he will take you in and love you as his own. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Tommy. Be brave, be kind, and remember that I will always be with you in spirit. Love, Mama." Tommy looked up at Mr. Jenkins, his eyes filled with tears. "Is it true?" he whispered, his voice breaking. Mr. Jenkins nodded, his own eyes brimming with tears. He read the letter again, the words sinking in. Sarah had kept this secret for 10 years, raising Tommy alone when she could have come to him. He felt a wave of regret, for the time lost, for the pain she must have carried, for not seeing what was right in front of him. "Yes, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It seems I'm your father." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled in the background, the only sound in the room. Then Mr. Jenkins pulled Tommy into a tight embrace, and they cried together, mourning Sarah, the lost years, and the pain of it all. But beneath the grief, there was something else, a sense of belonging, of family. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you and your mother," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice rough with tears. "I didn't know, Tommy. If I had, I would have been there. But I'm here now, and I promise I'll take care of you." Tommy hugged him back, his small body shaking with sobs. "Can I stay with you? Not just for today." Mr. Jenkins smiled through his tears, holding his son close. "You can stay forever, son. This is your home now." The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. Mr. Jenkins, now simply Dad to Tommy, contacted a lawyer in town to begin the process of legally adopting Tommy, though in their hearts, they were already father and son. The lawyer assured them it would be straightforward, given Sarah's letter and the lack of other relatives. Together, they went through Sarah's belongings, which Tommy had brought with him in his backpack. There wasn't much, just a few clothes, some photos, and her diary, but each item was a treasure. Among the photos were pictures of Sarah and Tommy, their smiles bright despite their struggles, and even a few faded snapshots of Mr. Jenkins from years ago, taken during Sarah's time at the ranch. Tommy kept his mother's diary close, reading it often to feel connected to her. As the weeks passed, Tommy settled into life on the ranch. He made friends with the ranch hands, burly men with kind hearts who taught him how to lasso and told him stories of their own childhoods. He even started attending the local school, a small building a few miles away where the teacher welcomed him with open arms. Though he still missed his mother terribly, the ranch gave him a sense of purpose and belonging. Mr. Jenkins, who had spent years in solitude after his wife's death, found new joy in being a father. He taught Tommy everything he knew about ranching: how to care for the animals, how to fix a fence, how to ride like a true cowboy. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, playing checkers or reading books, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. The ranch itself seemed to come alive with Tommy's presence. The horses nickered when he approached, and the chickens clucked happily as he scattered their feed. Even the old barn cat, a grizzled Tom named Whiskers, took a liking to him, curling up beside him on the porch. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they were repairing a section of the barn, Tommy turned to his father and said, "Dad, thank you for letting me stay." Mr. Jenkins paused, hammer in hand, and looked at his son. The word "dad" still felt new, but it warmed his heart every time he heard it. He smiled, his weathered face softening. "You can stay forever, son. This is your home." And so, the ranch became a place of healing and love, where a father and son found each other and built a new life together. There were still hard days, moments when Tommy would cry for his mother, or when Mr. Jenkins would feel the sting of regret. But they faced them together, drawing strength from one another. Years later, Tommy grew up to be a fine young man. He took over the ranch when his father retired, his hands calloused and strong from years of work. He married a kind woman named Lily, who loved the land as much as he did, and together they filled the ranch with children. 2 boys and a girl, each with Sarah's bright eyes and Tommy's quiet determination. On the wall of the ranch house hung a photo of Sarah, smiling down at them. Tommy often told his children stories about their grandmother, how she had been brave, how she had loved him fiercely, and how she had brought him to his father. The kids would listen wide-eyed, asking for the story again and again. Every year, on the anniversary of Sarah's death, Tommy and his father would visit her grave, a simple stone marker in the town cemetery. They'd leave flowers, wildflowers in the summer, evergreen sprigs in the winter, and share memories of her. Mr. Jenkins, now stooped with age but still sharp, would talk about her time at the ranch, while Tommy would recount the little things: the way she hummed while she cooked, the stories she made up at bedtime. Though she was gone, her love had united them, and they were grateful for the gift she had given them, each other. The ranch thrived, not just as a place of work, but as a home, a testament to the power of love, family, and second chances. The fields stretched out under the vast Montana sky, the horses galloped in the distance, and the laughter of children echoed through the air. And somewhere, somehow, Sarah was there watching over them all. Thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you love this video, and share your loved on.